Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered if you even know who you are? I'm not talking about some deep, philosophical crisis. I mean literally not knowing the truth about where you came from, who brought you into this world, or why the people you call family kept a secret so massive it could shatter everything you thought was real. That's the gut punch I got hit with just a few months ago when I uncovered a truth my parents had buried for nearly 3 decades. They weren't my biological parents, and the story of my birth was a carefully crafted lie. The betrayal, the confusion, the raw ache of not knowing who I really am. It's all still tearing me apart, and I'm desperate to share this journey with you. This isn't just about a hidden past. It's about how one single revelation can unravel your entire identity, make you question every memory, every hug, every "I love you" you've ever heard. I'm still trying to piece myself back together, to figure out if I can forgive the people who raised me, or if I even want to find the truth about my origins. From the heart-wrenching moment I stumbled on the secret to the unexpected twist that flipped my pain into something even more complicated, I'm laying it all bare. The anger, the longing, the tiny glimmers of hope that keep me going. Stick with me through this long, messy, emotional ride, because I need your help to figure out what comes next in a story that's changed how I see everything about my life. My name's Emily, and I'm 29 years old, living in the small, foggy coastal town of Astoria, Oregon, a place perched on the edge of the Pacific where the Columbia River meets the ocean, surrounded by steep, evergreen-covered hills and a constant drizzle that soaks into your bones. Astoria feels like a town frozen in time, with its Victorian houses painted in faded pastels, the creaky old trolley rattling along the waterfront, and the mournful cry of foghorns echoing through the gray mornings. I've lived here my whole life, working as a barista at a quirky little coffee shop called Brewed Awakening just off Commercial Street, where the walls are plastered with vintage movie posters and the air always smells of roasted beans and damp raincoats. It's a simple life, one I've always been content with, serving lattes to fishermen and tourists, sketching in my notebook during slow shifts, and coming home to my tiny apartment above a bookstore, where I can hear the distant crash of waves on stormy nights. I grew up thinking I had a pretty normal childhood, raised by my parents, Karen and Tom, in a modest craftsman house near Young's Bay, with a tire swing in the backyard and a golden retriever named Max who'd sleep at the foot of my bed. My dad was a history teacher at the local high school, always telling stories about Astoria's past as a bustling port town, while my mom worked part-time as a librarian, her gentle voice reading me bedtime stories from tattered fairy tale books. I never had a reason to doubt that they were my biological parents. Why would I? They had baby pictures of me, a birth certificate with their names on it, and endless stories about my first steps, my first words, all the little milestones that made up the tapestry of my early years. But last fall, on a rainy October afternoon, everything I thought I knew about myself came crashing down when I found a hidden box in their attic that revealed a secret they'd kept from me for 29 years. The emotional conflict that erupted inside me when I uncovered the truth felt like a tidal wave, dragging me under with a force I couldn't fight, leaving me gasping for air as I sat on the cold, dusty attic floor of my childhood home, surrounded by cobwebs and the faint, musty smell of old cardboard. I'd gone up there to help my parents clear out some junk before a big garage sale, something I did every few years to earn a little extra cash for my art supplies. While digging through stacks of forgotten Christmas decorations and broken furniture, I stumbled on a small, unmarked metal lockbox tucked behind a cracked mirror. Curiosity got the better of me. I figured it was just old tax documents or something boring like that, but when I pried it open with a rusty screwdriver, my heart stopped. Inside were papers, yellowed with age, including an adoption certificate dated just days after my supposed birthday, listing me as Baby Girl Doe before my name was changed to Emily Harper. There were letters, too, handwritten in a shaky scrawl I didn't recognize, addressed to my parents from someone named Clara, pleading with them to take care of her little girl and promising to stay out of the picture forever. My hands trembled as I read the words over and over, the rain pounding against the attic window like a drumbeat to my spiraling thoughts. My parents weren't my biological parents. I wasn't born to them in Astoria General Hospital like they'd always told me. I was adopted, and they'd lied about it my entire life. The betrayal sliced through me like a jagged knife, sharp and unrelenting, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. How could they keep something this huge from me? Every memory of them tucking me into bed, cheering at my school plays, bandaging my scraped knees, it all felt tainted now, like a performance I hadn't known I was part of. Anger bubbled up, hot and bitter, mixing with a deep, wrenching sadness that made my throat tight and my vision blur with tears. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, like the foundation of who I was had been ripped out from under me, leaving me floating in a sea of questions with no answers in sight. Memories of my childhood flooded back in the days after that discovery, each one now colored with doubt and suspicion as I wandered Astoria's misty streets, trying to make sense of a past that no longer felt like mine. I'd walk along the river walk, the cold wind whipping off the Columbia and stinging my cheeks, remembering how my dad would take me fishing off the pier as a kid, patiently teaching me to cast a line while seagulls screeched overhead. I'd always thought I inherited his quiet patience, his love for history, but now I wondered if that was just something I'd learned, not something in my blood. I thought about my mom braiding my hair before school in our cramped kitchen, the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air, humming old folk songs as she worked. I believed I got my artistic streak from her, my knack for sketching the moody landscapes of Astoria, but was that true, or just another illusion? I'd sit on the damp benches near the Astoria column, staring out at the fog-shrouded hills, replaying every family holiday. Thanksgivings with lumpy mashed potatoes, Christmases stringing popcorn garlands by the fireplace, wondering if there'd been signs I missed, little cracks in their story I was too naive to notice. Had they ever almost slipped up? Were there moments they looked at me and saw someone else's child, not theirs? The more I thought about it, the more isolated I felt, even in a town as small and tight-knit as Astoria, where everyone knows your name and waves as you pass by. I'd stop by the coffee shop on my days off, not to work, but to sit in the corner with a cooling mug of black coffee, sketching aimlessly in my notebook, feeling like an outsider in the one place I'd always called home. Every creak of the old wooden floors in my apartment, every distant foghorn, every familiar face I passed on Marine Drive, it all reminded me of a life built on a lie, and I didn't know how to reconcile the love I still felt for my parents with the resentment that gnawed at me every waking moment. The resentment grew heavier with each passing day, a dark cloud that followed me through Astoria's endless gray drizzle, tainting even the simplest joys I used to cling to. I couldn't bring myself to confront my parents right away. I was too raw, too afraid of what they'd say, or worse, what they wouldn't. I stopped answering their calls, letting their voicemails pile up, their cheerful, "Hey, just checking in," messages feeling like daggers when I knew they were still hiding the truth. I'd walk past our old house sometimes, just a few blocks from the waterfront, its peeling blue paint and sagging porch swing a snapshot of my childhood, and feel this bitter pang that I couldn't go inside without wanting to scream. I resented them for stealing my right to know who I am, for making every memory feel like a half-truth. I'd sit in my apartment late at night, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows on the walls, staring at that adoption certificate I'd taken from the box, tracing the unfamiliar name Clara with my finger, wondering if she was my real mother, if she was still out there somewhere, if she ever thought about me. I resented myself, too, for not noticing sooner, for being so blind to the possibility that my life wasn't what it seemed. I'd wander down to the beach at Fort Stevens State Park on the weekends, the cold sand squishing between my toes, the roar of the Pacific drowning out my thoughts, and feel this crushing weight that I might never know the full story, that I might always be stuck in this limbo of not belonging. Astoria, with its haunting beauty, the skeletal remains of the Peter Iredale shipwreck jutting out of the sand, the ghostly outline of the Megler Bridge disappearing into the fog, mirrored my inner chaos, a constant reminder of how lost I felt in a place I'd once known like the back of my hand. The unexpected twist came about 6 weeks after I found the box, and it turned my already fractured world on its head, leaving me with more questions than answers and a new layer of emotional turmoil to unpack. I'd been digging deeper into the papers from the lockbox, unable to let it go even though every new detail felt like a punch to the gut. One of the letters from Clara mentioned a hospital in Portland, about 2 hours south of Astoria, and a date just a few days before my official birthday. On a whim, fueled by a mix of desperation and reckless curiosity, I took a day off work and drove down there, the rain streaking across my windshield as I navigated the winding coastal highway, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and hope. I didn't expect to find much. Hospitals don't just hand out records to random people, but I managed to sweet-talk a kind older clerk in the records department into letting me peek at some archived files from that year, claiming I was researching family history. What I found wasn't just a birth record. It was a note in the margin of a patient log, scribbled in faded ink, indicating that Clara had been a teenager, only 16, when she gave birth to a baby girl, presumably me, and that she'd been in foster care herself, with no family to support her. My breath caught in my throat as I sat in the sterile hospital archive room, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, realizing that my biological mother hadn't just given me up out of choice. She might have had no other option, no safety net, no way to keep me. This twist didn't erase the pain of my parents' deception, but it shifted something inside me. A flicker of empathy for Clara, a pang of guilt for assuming she'd abandoned me without a second thought. But it also deepened my anger toward my parents. Why hadn't they told me this part of the story, even if they wanted to protect me? Why let me grow up thinking I was theirs by blood when they knew the heartbreaking circumstances of my birth? I drove back to Astoria that night, the dark highway stretching endlessly before me, feeling more torn than ever. Torn between a longing to find Clara, to understand her side, and a fear that doing so would unravel what little stability I had left with the only family I'd ever known. That revelation sparked a fire in me to redefine who I am, even as I wrestled with the emotional fallout, walking Astoria's foggy streets with a new, fragile sense of purpose. I didn't confront my parents immediately. I still wasn't ready, still too afraid of the answers I might get or the ones I wouldn't. Instead, I threw myself into understanding my own identity outside of their narrative. I started journaling every night in my apartment, the distant hoot of an owl outside my window blending with the scratch of my pen, writing down every memory, every feeling, every question I had about my past and who I wanted to be now. I'd sketch, too, filling pages with moody drawings of Astoria's landscapes, the jagged cliffs at Ecola State Park, the ghostly silhouette of the Gunny house from that old 80s movie, the endless gray of the ocean, trying to capture the beauty of a place that still felt like home, even if I didn't. I joined a local art group that met weekly at the community center near Bond Street, sharing my work with strangers who didn't know my story, finding a small sense of belonging in their quiet encouragement. I'd walk to the Astoria Sunday Market during the warmer months, weaving through stalls of handmade crafts and fresh crab, the air thick with the scent of grilled oysters and pine, buying little trinkets, a carved wooden whale, a jar of local honey, as if collecting pieces of this town could anchor me when I felt so adrift. I started researching adoption stories online, reading blogs and forums late into the night. The blue glow of my laptop screened the only light in my darkroom, connecting with others who discovered hidden truths about their origins. Their words, raw, messy, full of pain and hope, made me feel less alone, even if they couldn't answer the questions burning in my mind. Every step felt like wading through mud, slow and heavy, but it was something, a way to reclaim a piece of myself when everything else felt stolen. The process of rebuilding my sense of self forced me to confront parts of my past I'd buried, as I navigated this heartbreak in a town that felt both like a sanctuary and a cage with its constant reminders of a life I no longer fully understood. I'd sit on the rocky shore near Fort George Brewery, watching fishing boats bob on the choppy water, the tang of salt and diesel in the air, thinking about how much of my identity had been tied to being Karen and Tom's daughter. I'd always prided myself on being the history buff like my dad, the dreamer like my mom, but now I wondered who I'd be without those labels. I thought about the little quirks I'd always assumed were inherited, my love for rainy days, my habit of humming when I'm nervous, and questioned if they were really mine or just echoes of the people who raised me. I'd wander through Astoria's historic district, past the ornate Liberty Theater with its glowing marquee, past the tiny museum dedicated to the town's cannery history, and feel this ache for the simplicity of before, when I didn't question every piece of myself. I remembered the times my parents had seemed overly protective, never letting me travel far as a teen, always dodging questions about extended family, and saw those moments in a new, sinister light. Had they been afraid I'd uncover the truth? I'd stop by the coffee shop on slow days, leaning against the counter during quiet hours, staring out the rain-streaked window at the passing umbrellas, wondering if Clara had ever come through Astoria, if she'd ever stood in this very town looking for me. The more I reflected, the more I realized how much of my life had been shaped by a story I didn't write, and I didn't know if I had the strength to rewrite it on my own. Months passed, and as winter turned to a soggy spring, I'd built a fragile new normal, though it wasn't the solid, certain life I'd had before the discovery. I'd started saving up for a private investigator, taking extra shifts at the coffee shop, steaming milk and wiping down counters until my hands ached, determined to find Clara if I could, to at least know her story even if I wasn't ready to meet her. I'd moved my sketches into a small local gallery near Duane Street, a tiny space run by an eccentric artist who liked my moody ocean scenes, and seeing my work on display, seeing something undeniably mine, gave me a flicker of pride amidst the chaos. I'd walk along the waterfront at dusk, the sky a bruised purple over the river, the lights of Washington twinkling across the Megler Bridge, feeling a cautious hope that I could define myself outside of anyone else's choices. But the weight of my parents' secret still hung over me. I hadn't spoken to them about it yet, hadn't even hinted that I knew, though I'd see their car parked outside the coffee shop sometimes, my mom waving through the window with that same gentle smile, and feel this gut-wrenching mix of love and betrayal. I'd stare at old family photos on my phone, once taken at the annual Astoria Regatta with us all in matching windbreakers, or at the crab festival with butter dripping down our chins, torn between a longing to go back to that ignorant bliss and a need to face the truth head-on. I drive past their house on quiet nights, the warm glow of their living room lamp spilling onto the lawn, and feel this pull to stop, to knock, to ask why they lied. But I couldn't bring myself to do it, not when I wasn't sure if their answers would heal me or break me further. I also started reflecting more deeply on the small, mundane moments with my parents, the ones I'd taken for granted, as I tried to understand how we'd gotten to this point of silence and secrets. I remembered the way my mom would leave little notes in my lunchbox as a kid, silly doodles of smiling suns with "Have a bright day, M," scrawled underneath, and how I'd roll my eyes but secretly love them. I thought about the time my dad spent an entire rainy weekend building me a bookshelf for my tiny bedroom, sawdust covering his old flannel shirt, just so I'd have a place for my growing collection of novels. I recalled how, after I failed my first driving test at 16, they both took me out for ice cream at Freet and Scoop on 12th Street, laughing off my embarrassment with stories of their own teenage flops, the sweet tang of salted caramel melting on my tongue as I felt their unwavering support. Those small acts of love clashed so violently with the lie they'd maintained, and I couldn't reconcile the two versions of them in my mind. I'd sit on the damp grass near the Flavel House Museum, watching the fog roll in over the Victorian rooftops, wondering if their deception came from a place of protection or fear, if they'd ever planned to tell me, or if they thought I'd never find out. Astoria's timeless melancholy, the weathered docks, the abandoned cannery buildings, the endless cycle of rain and mist, felt like a mirror to my soul, reflecting a longing for answers I might never get, a grief for a past I couldn't reclaim. As I sit here now, in my quiet apartment with the rain tapping against the window, the distant rumble of a passing ship on the river, I'm still wrestling with what this all means for my future.